It was a quiet, strangely heavy night when I stepped outside to get some air. The neighborhood was almost silent, the kind of silence that makes every small sound feel louder than it should. For weeks my mind had been unsettled, my heart tired from arguments at home that never seemed to end. I kept telling myself things would get better, but each day it became harder to believe it. I felt more alone than ever, even inside my own house. My African neighbor lived 2 doors down. He wasn't someone I interacted with much, but I had always noticed the calmness in the way he carried himself. He greeted people gently, never in a hurry, always with a sincere smile that lingered long enough to feel real. We had exchanged a few nods before, nothing more. Tonight, though, he watched me from his porch with eyes that looked as if they understood something I hadn't said out loud. He stood up slowly and walked toward me, his steps soft on the pavement. I felt my heartbeat pick up, not out of fear, but out of surprise. It was rare for anyone in the neighborhood to approach at this hour. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. The question hit deeper than I expected. I tried to answer casually, but my voice stumbled somewhere in the middle. He noticed. He didn't press, didn't make it awkward, just gave a simple nod as if to say he understood more than he had asked. He hesitated for a few seconds, then said, "If you're not busy, would you come over for a few minutes? I want to talk with you. It's nothing serious, I just feel you shouldn't be standing outside alone like this." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The invitation felt unexpected, almost unusual. But at the same time, there was a warmth in his tone, nothing forceful, nothing suspicious, just a genuine gesture. I could feel the cold in my chest from everything happening at home, and the thought of sitting somewhere quiet, away from frustration, felt strangely comforting. Sure, I said, surprising even myself. We walked together toward his house. The night air felt different now, softer in a way I couldn't explain. His house looked warm from the outside, the lights dim and golden through the curtains. When he opened the door and stepped aside to let me in, I felt a moment of hesitation, a small whisper of guilt at the back of my mind. But the moment I stepped inside, the atmosphere wrapped around me like a blanket. The place was neat and calm. Soft music played somewhere in the background, not loud, not dramatic, just a gentle sound that made the room feel alive. The walls were decorated with framed photos of landscapes, city nights, and smiling faces that looked like fragments of another life. The room smelled faintly of incense, something warm and comforting. "You can sit anywhere," he said softly. I took a seat on the couch, trying to relax, though my mind was still tangled. He sat a short distance away, a respectful space between us, as if he didn't want to make me uncomfortable. For a few seconds we didn't speak. The silence wasn't awkward, just heavy with thoughts. "You looked upset when I saw you," he finally said. I didn't want to ignore that. His voice held a calmness that made it strangely easy to listen to him. I wasn't used to someone noticing my emotions, let alone caring enough to ask. At home, everything had become rushed, raised voices, tired excuses, broken promises. To have someone simply care, felt unfamiliar. "It's just been a long week," I replied, my voice low. He nodded slowly. "A long week can weigh on your whole life if you carry it alone." I looked at him, surprised at how accurately he had captured something I hadn't even expressed. There was no judgment in his eyes, no pity. Just presence. Sometimes presence is all a person really needs. The room felt safer than it should have. I could feel the tension inside my chest easing slightly, the way it does when someone finally sees you after a long time of feeling invisible. He didn't ask for details, didn't pry, he just made space for me to breathe. For the first time in many nights, I didn't feel like running away from my own thoughts. His calmness created a strange balance inside me. I felt lighter, and at the same time, something inside me felt more unsettled. Maybe it was the warmth of the room. Maybe it was his quiet attention. Maybe it was the loneliness I had been carrying for so long. But something was shifting, slowly, silently, in a way I couldn't yet understand. As the minutes passed, our silence softened. I found myself noticing small things about him, the way he listened even when I wasn't speaking, the way he carried a quiet strength, the way his presence felt safe without being demanding. Something in that moment told me that tonight would not end the same way it began. He returned from the kitchen carrying 2 glasses of water, placing one gently on the table in front of me. The small gesture felt unexpectedly considerate. I murmured a soft, "Thank you," and he nodded as if it was nothing at all, though the kindness behind it stayed with me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The quiet music in the background filled the space between us, a low rhythm that made the room feel warmer than before. The dim light softened everything, the furniture, the walls, even the expression on his face. I could feel his eyes on me here and there, not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but in a way that made me feel noticed. "You know," he said finally, leaning back slightly, "some people carry so much, yet no one ever asks them how they're doing. I can see that weight on you." His words caught me off guard again. I looked away, letting out a small breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "It's nothing dramatic," I said, but even I could hear the sadness behind my own voice. "Just things at home. It's been rough lately." He nodded slowly, waiting, not pushing, not asking for more, simply letting me choose whether to continue. That patience alone felt like an unfamiliar luxury. "My partner and we've been distant," I finally admitted. "A lot of misunderstandings. A lot of silence. It feels like I'm talking to the walls most days." His expression softened, a mixture of empathy and quiet understanding. "Being with someone who doesn't hear you," he said gently, "can feel lonelier than being completely alone." I swallowed, surprised at how accurately he captured the feeling that had been eating at me for months. "Exactly." He shifted slightly, turning more toward me. "You deserve someone who listens. Someone who sees you." Those words hit deeper than I expected. Maybe it was because I hadn't heard anything like that in a long time. Maybe it was because they came from someone who had nothing to gain by saying them. "What about you?" I asked, trying to tilt the focus away from myself. "You said something earlier, that you've been through similar things." A small, almost nostalgic smile touched his lips. "Yes, a long time ago. Someone I cared about stopped caring back. I kept giving, and they kept taking, until there was nothing left in me. I promised myself I'd never let anyone feel the way I felt then." There was something so honest in the way he said it that it drew me in. His voice was calm, but the memory behind his words felt heavy, almost painful. I found myself studying him more closely, noticing the depth in his eyes, the steadiness in the way he breathed. "That's why I asked you to come," he continued softly. "Not because I wanted anything from you, but because I felt something in your silence tonight. Something I recognized. A warmth spread through me, not the kind that sparks instantly, but the kind that builds slowly, like light rising behind clouds." His presence felt grounding, comforting in a way I hadn't experienced in so long that I almost didn't remember what it felt like. I shifted slightly, and he noticed, leaning a little closer, not invading my space, just making it easier to speak without raising my voice. "I didn't mean to worry you," I said. "I just needed some air. Some space. Everyone needs space sometimes," he said. "But no one should carry everything alone." The sincerity in his voice made my chest tighten. I looked down at my hands, feeling a strange ache, one made of loneliness, relief, and something else I wasn't ready to name. He reached out, very slowly, and placed his hand near mine, not touching, not assuming, just there. Close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. Close enough that I knew the choice was mine. I didn't move away. The silence between us deepened. Not heavy anymore, not uncomfortable, just full. Full of thoughts neither of us dared to say aloud. Full of questions about how we ended up here on a random night, sitting in a quiet house filled with soft music and unspoken emotions. His voice dropped slightly, gentle but clear. "You can talk to me, if you want. I'm here." I felt something break inside me, not painfully, but softly, like a knot loosening after being tight for too long. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to listen, someone to simply sit with me without judgment. So I spoke. Not everything, not the deepest parts, but enough. Enough for him to understand that the loneliness I carried had been growing for months. Enough for him to see the cracks I had been hiding from everyone else. And he listened. Completely. Patiently. Without interrupting, without rushing me. As the night deepened, something between us shifted, quietly, slowly, naturally. Not with a sudden spark, but with a gentle pull neither of us tried to resist. Some boundaries don't break with noise. Sometimes, they melt in silence. And in that silence, something new began to form. The hours seemed to stretch as we remained there, sitting in a quiet room where only the soft hum of music filled the space. It was the kind of silence that felt alive, not empty. I realized I was starting to lose track of time, not because I was distracted, but because every small gesture, every subtle glance, seemed to matter more than the minutes ticking by. He spoke less now, letting me carry most of the conversation. And yet, even in his quietness, I felt him there, steady, present. The way he occasionally nodded or tilted his head made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not admired, not desired, not judged, but understood. A gentle tension began to grow between us, not the kind sparked by bold actions or sudden confessions, but a slow, simmering awareness that something unspoken was shifting. I noticed the warmth of his hand close to mine, the faint scent of his cologne, the calm steadiness in his breathing. My heart beat a little faster, and with each subtle movement, each soft look, I felt the pull of something I had tried so hard to ignore. I thought about my partner at home, about the arguments and the distance, about the emptiness that had been growing for months. I felt a pang of guilt, sharp but quiet, mingled with the undeniable need to experience this rare sense of being understood. It wasn't just attraction, it was something deeper, a craving for connection, for care, for attention that felt genuine. He finally spoke, breaking the silence with words that felt deliberate, careful. "You deserve to be happy. You deserve someone who makes you feel safe and seen." The words resonated inside me, echoing a longing I had pushed aside. It wasn't about romance alone. It was about comfort, about belonging. And yet, in that room, in that quiet space, the line between emotional support and something more began to blur. I felt a gentle pull toward him, not sudden, not demanding, just an instinctive leaning toward the warmth he offered. I could sense the same tension in him, restrained but undeniable. There was a moment, brief but heavy, when our hands brushed, not fully, but close enough to feel the warmth radiating from each other. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from the awareness of crossing into something forbidden yet comforting. I looked into his eyes, searching for judgment, and found none. Only understanding, only patience, only quiet acknowledgement that we were both aware of the delicate boundary we were approaching. The silence returned, heavier now with meaning. I realized I had been holding myself back, not from him, but from myself. From the truth that I had been craving attention, empathy, and connection that had been missing from my life. And here it was, tangible, present, offered without expectation, yet tinged with a tension that made my heart race. It was in that quiet, suspended moment that I felt the choice weigh on me. I could step back, return to the safety of the life I knew, the rules I had lived by. Or I could lean in, even just emotionally, letting myself feel what had been denied for so long. I didn't speak, I didn't move, but my entire being recognized the shift. Something important, fragile, and irreversible had begun. Time seemed to bend. A few minutes or hours could have passed, I wasn't certain. All that mattered was the awareness of him beside me, the unspoken comfort, the shared understanding. My mind flickered between guilt and relief, fear and longing, past regrets and present needs. It was exhausting, exhilarating, and overwhelming all at once. Finally, he reached out, not with boldness, not with demand, but with gentle intent. Our hands met, fingers lightly entwining in a tentative acknowledgement of what was happening. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of everything we had been feeling all night. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the warmth sink in, letting the quiet understanding fill the spaces inside me that had been empty for so long. We stayed like that for a while, neither speaking, both aware of the uncharted path we had begun to walk. It wasn't a choice made lightly. It wasn't reckless. It was quiet, emotional, and deeply human, a recognition that sometimes connection doesn't wait for permission. And in that moment, everything changed. The night no longer felt ordinary. The room no longer felt empty. And I knew, even if I didn't fully understand how or why, that my life had shifted in a way I could not ignore. Morning light crept slowly through the curtains, soft and pale, touching the room with quiet clarity. I woke with a heaviness I hadn't anticipated, my mind still replaying every moment from the night before. The warmth of his hand, the calm of his presence, the way he had simply listened, it all lingered in a way that made my chest ache. I sat up slowly, wrapping my arms around my knees, trying to process the mix of relief, guilt, and longing that filled me. I realized I had crossed a line, not physically, but emotionally. A barrier I had built to protect myself from disappointment and loneliness had shifted, and there was no way to ignore it. My thoughts immediately turned to my partner at home, the arguments, the silences, the frustration and distance that had pushed me towards someone else's understanding. He stirred nearby, still quiet, still calm. There was no rush in his movements, no expectation in his gaze, only the steady presence that had defined the night. I met his eyes, searching for reassurance, for guidance, for something to tell me it was okay to feel what I was feeling. And in his steady, patient gaze, I found neither judgment nor pressure, only acknowledgement. "I didn't want to complicate things," he said softly. "I just wanted you to know that someone sees you." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I know," I whispered. "And I'm glad you were here." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything that had transpired. Gratitude, relief, recognition, and a quiet ache all mingled together. We shared a brief, lingering silence, understanding that nothing needed to be said to capture the intensity of what had passed. When it was time to leave, I felt a strange tension in my chest, a mixture of fear and inevitability. I walked out of his house slowly, the morning air crisp against my skin. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, questions, and emotions. How would I face my partner? How would I reconcile the connection I had found last night with the life I had been living? Could I go back to the way things were, or was that chapter now closed? Returning home felt heavier than usual. Everything seemed sharper, the creak of the floorboards, the silence of the rooms, the familiar scent of a life that had grown distant. My partner noticed something immediately, though neither of us spoke right away. I could feel the weight of the gaze, curious and cautious, as if sensing the subtle change in me. I knew that nothing could be undone, not the feelings I had experienced, not the recognition of what I had been missing. And yet, I also knew that clarity had come. I had felt the warmth of understanding, the comfort of being truly seen, and I could not ignore the truth of it. The path forward was uncertain, but it was mine to consider, mine to navigate. In the days that followed, I reflected deeply on what had happened. I thought about boundaries, choices, and the human need for connection. I thought about love, fidelity, and the subtle ways that emotional intimacy can shift hearts and minds. I thought about the African neighbor, about his calm presence, about the night that had changed everything. The story was not one of reckless abandon, nor was it one of betrayal in the dramatic sense. It was a story of human longing, emotional honesty, and the fragile, complicated ways that hearts reach out for what they need. Sometimes, the most profound moments are quiet, subtle, and fleeting, but their impact can last far longer than the night itself. And in that realization, I found a measure of peace. I could not undo the choices or the feelings, but I could carry forward the awareness that emotional connection matters, that being truly seen is rare, and that life is sometimes shaped by moments of courage, vulnerability, and truth. The story of that night would remain with me forever, a silent reminder of what it means to be human, to seek, to feel, and to be seen, even in the quietest, most unexpected hours.